I'll do that first because that's cooler. Right. So this is Sky Unixware. And this is my system call fuzzer. Just let it run, and bam, that's a kernel panic. The ping kind of thing there, that's a kernel panic. My mouse is no longer moving, it's dead. So, okay. I'm done with this, because I'm going to close VMware because it's a huge drain on resources. Okay, so. So this is what you guys just saw. You get a normal Unix and you're working on it and you're doing stuff and bam, it goes down. Oops, something went wrong. And here's another cool thing. When I rebooted the VMware, it gave me a core dump of the kernel. Do you want to save this core dump? And I'm like, of course I want to save it. Do you want to compress it? No, because I have enough disk space. Do you want to encrypt it? Yes, because I don't want other evil hackers to see the things I've done. And then you go like, okay, so enter your encryption key. And obviously there's an evil hacker standing behind me, so I don't want him to see my key. But then, my key's there in plain text. So it kind of makes no sense to give an encryption key and then just put it on your screen like, hi, I'm an encryption key. Right. So another really cool thing, a very small fuzzer is what the guys from Ethereal developed. Because I don't know if you guys have looked at Ethereal over the years, but they've spit out a lot of advisories. The advisories kept growing exponentially. In 2001 it was like 1 or 2 issues, and at the beginning of this year there were like 50 issues in one advisory. So what the guys at Ethereal did is they said, well, we don't want to have this kind of bad record. So they made their own little fuzzing tool, and they used editcap, which is a tool they've made, and they made a small shell script around it, which does some statistics and tells you some things that editcap wouldn't. And it's written by the guy who made Ethereal, Gerald Gomes. And today, I think they fuzz more than 600 bugs in Ethereal. That's kind of impressive. The usual stuff: overflows, endless loops, no pointer references, division by 0, and a lot of other things. And what's interesting is, and I don't think anybody's ever done that before, or at least not talked about it, is that basically what this tool does, it takes a PCAP file, which is a almost raw file of network data coming through with some metadata in it. And it takes a PCAP file, and it just searches for stuff and changes bytes, puts format string bucks in there, and FFFFF and things like that, and then just feeds it to Ethereal, this PCAP file, because Ethereal can parse PCAP files. And if Ethereal breaks, they just fuzz the bug with this thing. So you don't even need network connectivity. You just need a good PCAP file, and bam. And the cool thing is, TCP dump can also parse PCAP files. So you could just take this fuzzer, and the only thing you'd have to change is the name of the program you want to call, which is, instead of Ethereal, it's now TCP dump, and just let it parse that file. And I'm guessing that if you would do that on TCP dump, you'd easily get lots of bugs, because TCP dump is not written with security in mind. Right. So, and this is one of their advisories, I think, May or June or something. And this is some of the stuff they found with their fuzz tool. They're freeing uninitialized variables and infinite loops, and trivial stack smashes, all sorts of very nasty stuff. Another fuzzing framework, which is called BED. I've forgotten what it stands for now. But it's a fuzzing framework which is written in Perl. It's got some cool scripts, and it has a very, very simple way to make scripts for it. Basically, the scripts you write for BED are also written in Perl. And it's got some, well, I'll show you in the next slide, some really cool, easy things in there, which makes sense. So, right, so next slide after that, that is. Some of the things it broke, basically some web servers and FTP servers on Windows. Nothing that big, but it's a nice framework. It's a smaller one, so it doesn't have lots of APIs or lots of cool scripts, but it's an interesting one. Right. So this is a simple. This is what plugins for bed look like, where you've got initialize, how to quit, do pre-out stuff, do stuff after authentication, how to do authentication, these kinds of things. So bed's only made for network fuzzing either, but I like the way they've organized things. Right. So here's another small thing I've made, which is called IRC fuzz. And basically what IRC fuzz is it's a very small fake IRC daemon. And when somebody connects, it'll just spit out something that looks like IRC, but it's really not, and it's just designed to try to break your IRC client. And basically, with the exception of IRC, all other clients I tried broke. Nothing survived. Right. Oh, I'm not going to show this one yet because I'm going to demonstrate it first. I have it here. Right. So I've got the IRC fuzzer already running. I'm going to do it in full screen. I've got it running, and I've got it in a debugger attached, or I'm going to run it through the debugger so that you can see things that go wrong. And you run it, and it connects to it. Bam, it dies. You run it again, it dies again. So it's got like lots and lots, 4 or 5 bugs that easily pop up. Just, we've got 3 different bugs right now, and I think my bug count right now is like 15 or 16. So lots of things in there. Obviously, this shows that IRC2 was written in another area, another period of time, and it's not up to standards these days anymore. The guys who wrote it didn't have a clue what security was, and what the fuck is bound checking, and what's kind of, which I'll show in one of my slides. Right. So the next slide is, so this is basically one of the stack smashes you saw there. And one of the stack smashes is kind of cool because it's just a message that you're sending. So it's bigger than 512, so you would assume that servers don't allow it through, which is true, which they don't. But because it's just a simple message, you can do a DCC chat, and when people accept it, you can just, basically, if you want to own them with that, you can just do it client-side. You don't need to have an evil server for that. So this is one of the stack smashes you saw. And I've got a friend of mine whose nickname is JDuck, and he's got an IRC client, which is based upon IRC2. It's called Ninja. So I sent him my fuzzer and say, try it and see what happens. And because his client was based on IRC2, most of the bugs in IRC2 showed up in his client as well. So he fixed them, and he sent an email to the guy who's responsible for maintaining IRC2. And he got an email back from the guy saying, oh, yes, I know about that bug. We're just not going to fix it. So I don't really remember the reason why, but I think it's kind of odd that if you've got this amount of things, which you can easily fix. I mean, you've just seen it, just bug after bug after bug, just right then and there. So this is pretty bad, and I don't know why the guy hasn't fixed it or doesn't want to fix it, but he should. So right, so that's IRC fuzz. It's kind of, a funny thing. Next one's ISIC. This one's a bit older, I think in the 90s, maybe 98 or something. And it's basically an IP stack integrity checker. It's not called a fuzzing tool, because back then people weren't calling things fuzzing tools, but it is a fuzzing tool. It's written in C. It's written by a guy called Mike Franze. Basically, it generates IP, TCP, UDP, and I think even ICMP data, which is flawed. It looks like it, but it's really not that kind of data. And then, it's got some cool stuff in there. ISIC may break shit, melt your network, knock out your firewall, or sing the fur of your cat. So it's a pretty cool thing. And if you see the next slide, it's broken a lot of very high-profile stuff. You don't want your firewall all of a sudden quitting. That's kind of bad. And a few other things. And probably if you run it against some other things these days, you'll probably find cool things. Right. So that's ISIC. Right. The next one's Combust. This is written by a guy at Stake, Brett. I guess it's Symantec now. He did a talk about this with Black Hat, and he showed how to use it. And I've kind of played with it for one day. And I installed my XP Service Pack 2, a fresh install. I did a complete upgrade, and this was like back in June or something. And you're playing with it one night, I came up with about 15 bugs. So, and some of those things can be triggered through Internet Explorer, which I'll show in the next, well, show some of the screenshots on the next page. So you find a shocking amount of stuff in, you know, things that people are running today, which is, you know, with the latest security patches and things like that. One of the things that it doesn't do is it doesn't enumerate over all the COM objects you have in Windows. So you just go to Microsoft.com, you look for this tool called Oily View, and so this one, and download it, and this will give you an overview of all the registered COM objects on your Windows box. And you've got to find COM objects that have the iDispatch method, because otherwise you can't fuzz them with Combust. But you find a lot of stuff with it, and so this is the first thing. And basically, what you see above here is the OLA View tool from Microsoft. And what you see here is, well, what you see here is Combust. And basically, what you do is you say, give me the class ID of that COM object, and it'll just see all the methods that it exports and that you can use, and it'll try to fuzz all of them. And Combust has a fairly big configuration file. So a lot of the things in Combust can be modified. Like if you want to overflow with not A's or B's, and you don't want strings to be 5,000 lines of code, 5,000 characters long, but 7,000, then that's okay. However, if you make the lines that you want to fuzz with bigger than 15,000 lines of A's or B's or whatever, Combust will crash. So yeah, guess there's a bug in Combust as well. And then I've got another screenshot with some other stuff. So basically, what it does is it tries to fuzz all the integers and long strings and things like that into all the methods that a COM object has that it can get its hands on. And then whenever any kind of exception occurs, it'll just catch it and say crash. And if you want to see what's actually going on, you have to attach a debugger. And I'll talk about those kind of things later. Most of those COM objects are not exceptionally useful anymore with IE, because these days most of the COM objects have the kill bit set in Windows. And you can no longer reach them from IE unless the guy sitting in front of it clicks on OK 3 times. Which I guess is pretty much okay, because most people on Windows do that anyway. They don't read their messages anymore. Just OK, just let me continue. But you can't just do it. You need user interaction. But some of these are kind of nasty. I think there's some heap overflows in there, but they're mostly no-point references, though. Right. So, oh yeah, the other thing I want to say about Combust is that it's binary only. So it's got a lot of features. It's does a lot of cool things that you want it to do, and it's very configurable. But it's binary. You can't extend it. If it's missing some very specific part that you want to do that you can't do, it's binary only. So unless you're a really good reverse engineer and you can put binary code in there, you can still extend it. But that's a lot of work. You might just as well write something from scratch, which somebody did. And it's basically the same thing as Combust. It's open source, but it lacks a lot of the feature that Combust has. Combust really is very, very configurable. This one is not, but it's open source. So if you want to have these features in there, you can just hack on it. It's written by a guy called Shane Hart. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Hirt? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him, so. But it looks promising. I haven't actually toyed around with it much, but the things that I did see is that it's more limited than Combust right now, or at least when I looked at it. That was a couple of months ago, so they might have added more stuff in there. I don't know. Right. So the next tool is Fuzz Server, which is written by another guy from @stake or Symantec, which basically is a web client or a gateway fuzzer. And it's also written in C. It's open source. I think it's made for Windows, but it might also work on Linux. Right. And this is because it's got like cool ASCII stuff in there explaining how it works. And basically, you've got your web client and your web proxy and your fuzz server, so you send a request. And basically what a fuzz server does is it does very trivial HTTP or WDP fuzzing. I guess the kind of fuzz sets are somewhat outdated for these days. But I've been told by a couple